Good morning.
Morning, Peter. Is a seat over here, Peter, or?
Yeah, sure.
It's kind of weird because it's set up for the police training,
Right.
so. Right, is that true, David? Am I speaking the truth here? Okay. So call to order the meeting of Nantucket Visitors Service Committee, June 11th, 2019. This meeting is audio-video recorded. I have the approval of minutes for May 16th.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Motion carries. And conversation with Noah. Heiberg Noah, do you know everyone?
No.
So Mary,
Mary Malvase.
Mary, okay. Sharon Quigley,
Sharon Quigley.
then, you know Jean,
Peter. You want
you know me, and David, okay.
We asked Noah to join us today to give us an update on what's the new things that are happening at the airport, and if there's anything that we might do better as visitor services at the airport, or any kind of advocacy that they might be needing for support over there.
Great. Well, if it's all right with the committee, I do have a handout I was going to circulate. I believe I should have enough copies.
Okay.
Tom sends his regards as well. He had a pre-existing meeting with his chair and vice chair at 8:30, so he is sending me in his place. I have just a few topics I wanted to go over, about 10 or 12 minutes, talking about air service historically, presently, and in the future at the airport. For the first goal, where I'm going to talk about perception and who is our passenger that we're looking towards, I am going to reference the handout, which is an article we wrote for Libby Gibson's Town Manager's newsletter. At the airport, we're very interested in our perception and understanding who our passenger is. And one of the criticisms we've heard from the community and we've worked to overcome is that the airport is dead. I don't fly. Fares are too expensive. Who is the airport serving? And one of the data dives that we looked at was in figure 1, we looked at what the historical market share was of the airport versus the ferries. And we found out that there was really only a 10-year period where the airport was on equal footing with the boats as far as a portion of passenger trips. It was kind of our golden era from 1996 to around 2006, where the airport fought its way up to a 50% market share. With the boats, it seems to have been a very important time locally. It's what people tend to remember. 3 different air taxi companies walking up to the gate, getting a ticket, flying across for $30 or $40. Since 2008 in the recession, the local airlines never really recovered. Our market share has slipped. That's kind of been the story of the last 5 years of the airport. The statistic that I'd like to bring out is in 2006, the airport enplaned 200,000 passengers going to Hyannis. And over the last 3 years, that's been about 20,000 passengers. So it's an order of magnitude decline over a decade. And we're at about the floor of the market. That's been consistent for the last 3 years. 20,000 passengers down from 200,000. So our history was a local history then. Local Nantucketers were using the airport to go back and forth to Hyannis. Now we're a large air carrier market and we're JetBlue dominant. JetBlue overtook Cape Air in 2017 as our dominant carrier, enplaning more people in their season than Cape Air does annually. We also received a new update to the Mass DOT Economic Impact Study. The DOT, Department of Aeronautics, puts out an economic impact study. What is the direct spending by passengers in our market? What is the amount they spend in lodging, the lodging taxes that they generate, and all of those metrics. And we're finding out that our commercial passengers spend about $1,100 per day on average in food, lodging, and retail on island. About 350,000 $350 million a year is the entire economic impact. We don't break it out by our corporate GA passengers. We don't have that data, but we assume it's more. So even though we're in an era where the airport might seem less important locally as a primary means of transportation, the reality is that the airport has never been more economically important to the island than it has been before. One item I found, I did this for Florencia. She wanted to know what are airfares traditionally at the airport. I looked back through our history. Our first recorded commercial airfare was in 1940. A gentleman flew from, in 1940, from Nantucket to Providence for $12.50, which is $228 in today's dollars. And, graphs 2 and 3 on the handout, I just show in further detail the decline of the air taxi market and the increase of the large air carrier market. So today, when it comes to air service, Nantucket is like a lot of other airports across the country. Small airports, Hyannis, Nantucket. I'm from Michigan. There are a number of small airports there. Traverse City, Pellston, Kalamazoo. They're all losing service. Airlines have consolidated. There are fewer airlines. There's a national pilot shortage. The biggest carriers are winning. Cape Air had a hard time retaining pilots. Island Air went out of business because of it. Great Lakes Air in the Midwest went out of business because of it. It's a major issue in the market, and the smallest airlines and the smallest locales are feeling the brunt of that. Nantucket is actually very fortunate that our summer market supports a extremely high level of service in the summer, and we have good shoulder service. Where we lack is year-round service. We have a low amount of year-round competition, both in carriers and markets and in fares. This summer, the airport has also seen, this is the third straight year we're looking at an 11 to 12% increase in our secure passenger market over the summer months. So we've been seeing double-digit growth for the airlines that serve Nantucket past security. The 4 large carriers are responsible for this: JetBlue, American, United, and Delta. They each run seasons between 11 weeks and 6 months. JetBlue will give us 6 months. Delta will give us 12 weeks. The other airlines fall somewhere in between there, with Cape Air being year-round. We added a new hard-fought entrant. Southern Airlines starts service this Thursday or Friday. We've been recruiting them for 3 years to come in and be a small air carrier with a year-round competition for Cape Air. They're flying 3 new destinations: Norwood, Massachusetts, Providence, and New Haven. Initially, these are all non-secure flights, so no TSA screening. The idea is that it's a quick get you to your destination, where not only we have a high degree of originating and departing passengers in Connecticut, as well as Massachusetts, but at Haven and Providence, Southern has an American Airlines interline, which means you can check your bags through and board flights from American and have access to American's international route network. For this year over last, JetBlue continues to expand their presence. They have a very focused New York and Boston strategy. They're looking to corner the markets out of Logan and JFK. They've added JFK service. They've added to their existing JFK service. They've increased their their New York service by adding LaGuardia, which is a new market on JetBlue, and Westchester White Plains is a new market that they're serving this summer.
LaGuardia to here?
To here, yes. American increased their Charlotte service. We think it happened accidentally. They started last Saturday with their weekly from Charlotte.
Say that again, please. What did you say?
American increased their Charlotte service. I think it happened accidentally. Their airline staff wasn't aware of it. They scrambled to get ready for it. They were supposed to start the 22nd with their Saturday Charlotte flight. They added a turn on the 15th and the 8th. The loads on the 8th were very good. It's a 76-seat plane. I think they had 67 incoming passengers on it. Everyone says, why Charlotte? Well, American and their network strategy, they realize that a large part of our market is actually beyonds, people who live beyond Boston, beyond New York, beyond DC, and they collect them all in Charlotte. bring them in, and they're targeting the Saturday turnover days. And that's been a very full, very successful service, and one we're trying to get them to increase. So I mentioned Southern entering the market, and one item that we've been looking at, and we would love feedback on Philadelphia in particular and other destinations. We're trying to recruit 2 airlines to fly Philadelphia. It's our biggest unserved market. When we do our data analysis, we find that we have the same amount of cultural connections as we do with Washington, D.C. And Washington, D.C. supports daily large air carrier service in the summer. So I just came back from a meeting. It's called Jumpstart. It's the speed dating with airlines meeting. And we pitched Philadelphia to both American and JetBlue, and we hope that they'll pick it up. So that's the future. Philadelphia is our last unserved market. We're trying all the time to sell airlines on a stronger shoulder. We're trying to get them to build out just week by week, year over year. We don't want them to overinvest, not see a return, and then take a larger pullback than they normally would. So we're trying to slowly prove the shoulder season to them. And the other industry trend is what's known as upgauging, larger planes. JetBlue is replacing their 100-seat E190 with a 140-seat Airbus 220 starting in 2 years. The American service that we enjoy is an upgrade. It's a 76-seat jet up from a 50-seat jet. And we also, in the future, we expect the same with Delta, as they're moving the 50-seat jets out of their fleet and moving in the 76 and 100-seat jets. The other way we look at it at the airport, we don't control island capacity. That's controlled by lodging. We're just trying to find and make arguments for the most efficient way to get passengers here. At the rate which they spend $1,100 per day, another couple hours or another half day on Nantucket is more t-shirts, more meals. Maybe it's even an extra night. We have that direct connection. So there are also some challenges, and that's what we wanted to bring to you for my last issue, which is support and advocacy. The national airline system or air transportation system is funded by taxes that you pay on your tickets. You pay an origination tax, you pay a flight segment tax, airlines pay tax on jet fuel that they purchase. It all goes into a national fund administered by the FAA. And then they write checks to different airports for their infrastructure projects. If Nantucket needs a new runway, if the Vineyard needs a new fire truck, it all comes from this national trust fund. As I'm sure you've all seen, when you buy tickets now, you're looking at a la carte pricing. You buy your base fare ticket, and then you can pay for any number of upgrades, boarding sooner, checking a number of bags, buying other amenities. Those are all uncoupled from the ticket price, so those go untaxed. So even though fare prices have remained the same or even slightly lower over the past few years, the amount of tax revenue going into this fund has been declining, not only in absolute terms, but as we go through cycles of inflation and purchasing power. So there's a lot less money out there for infrastructure. The competition for, I won't say that all of the past projects the FAA has funded at different airports have been needed, but there is no slop in any of those. And even now some airports have critical projects that the region and the nation doesn't have money to fund. Here at Nantucket, we know this very well. We have a 34-year-old taxiway. Taxiway Echo is our main parallel taxiway to our main runway. It's the one that runs the whole length of 624. It's 34 years old and we're failing. The FAA won't give us any money for it. They still look at Nantucket as, oh, you're a small seasonal airport. You only have 130,000 enplanements. The way I look at it, you might be able to tell I'm very numbers focused. I went through the region. We're the only major commercial service airport that hasn't received discretionary funding in the last 8 years from the FAA. So we are in effect owed about $22 million for that, which is the cost of our taxiway. So if you look at a year of 140,000 annual enplanements, well, 35,000 of those occur monthly during July and August. If you annualize that peak monthly enplanement rate, that's 420,000 enplanements a year. That's actually what we need to build our capacity to, because that is our peak capacity for 3 months of the year. If if you take my model and run the numbers, you find that we're shorted on the order of $30 or $40 million for our infrastructure repairs. And then if you look at the Nantucket factor, which is another 80% on construction costs, this gets up into $60 million. So there is a role for advocacy for Nantucket. We have infrastructure repairs. We're in an era of aging infrastructure. To keep pace with the service that supports the community, we need to, and we do, we advocate to the FAA, we advocate to our congressional delegation. We also need our partners to advocate for us on our behalf. So that is the direct ask, where there are opportunities to make cases to funding bodies or legislatures. It's, the airport shouldn't be overlooked just because we're a seasonal airport. The value of our customer and the fact that our customers really are from across the country and from across the nation. We're not just funding local Nantucket passengers going back and forth to Hyannis. The other, we're active on social media. We're trying to push anyone who will listen, basically, to fly on these airlines. When JetBlue has a $79 fare special to JFK, fly that route. Prove that there is a traveling population on Nantucket that will make use of these flights if these shoulders continue to be expanded with service. And we also look at comprehensive planning as something for a broader group to support. Who do we want using the airport? We're also well aware of ferry congestion at the terminal, which, as a whole transportation system for the island, what is the best purpose of the airport? What's the best purpose of the ferry terminal? We are also interested in listening to what comprehensive community planning needs are. So those are my canned words. I hope that didn't go too long, Janet, and I hope that was on target.
Yeah, I think the Philadelphia market can be supported by data that the Chamber has. It shows where they're doing their marketing efforts too. It's the third largest market for their funds, or it was when I was there, because that's where the population comes from. And you can see that same data if you look at the second homeowners and where they're from. And it's Philadelphia is the third one that they're coming from. So I would argue that, you've got a market there.
I'll add to that. We use the same thing. We use the second homer tax database. Since we own and operate the private terminal, we use the origination and departure data on that. And then we work with a data platform on the mobility data. The thing that we found about the Philadelphia market, right now only 20% of the originating travelers from Philadelphia are coming here by air. So they're either leaking, let me get my geography right, up to Newark, over to Newark, or to the New York market, up. They're either leaking from Philadelphia to another airport to fly, or they're driving, which is one-day drive as I understand it each day.
We used to have an airline that did fly out of Philadelphia. Was that Kogan? Do you know? I mean, the numbers, was it Kogan?
Kogan was before my time, so I'm at the airport. So
all right. I mean, there was, I can't remember what the flight was, but it was very popular. Out of Philadelphia.
Had some too.
Pardon me?
US Air had some too.
Maybe it was US Air.
Because Kogan was coming out of the BWI market.
Yeah, so it might have been US Air.
I would assume American or US Air before the merger, because Philadelphia is a current American.
Maybe it was US Air. It was really busy.
How are passengers getting from the airport into town or to their final destination?
Ground transportation is going to be, I guess it's roughly a 50-50 or a 60-40 split taxi to TNCs, the combination of Uber, Lyft, and miscellaneous. We do see some friends and family, but we don't keep tabs on it.
And how many passengers are coming in between 7 and 10 in the morning in the season?
Few. I do not. We have that data, but it's dominantly 10 or 11 a.m. to 3 p.m.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
What's happening in the markets, especially with more service, airlines operate what are called flight banks. There are common connecting times that give the most overlap between incoming flights at a major hub market. All of the airlines are pinching down on those popular flight banks. So while we're seeing increased service to the tune of 11% annually in that market, our peaks are actually up at about 25-30% at our peak hours, which is a facility issue we're working through.
When you say that you guys are, asking for the support or the advocacy of your partners, and what do you have in mind, or what is an ideal form of advocating for the airport or for?
When folks have one-on-one contact with their members of Congress, they have an opportunity to say, hey, Nantucket's taxiway is 34 years old and we rely on it for impact. We're not asking for lobbying funds, we're just asking for an awareness and communication.
May I suggest just, I feel like this has been so incredibly informative. Like, I think that I have joined a lot of Nantucketers maybe in my generation, where that 2003-ish area was all flying back and forth really fast, and it just felt like everything went out of business, and I feel like people started to think of the airport as like big pharma, that it was greedy and, just needed all this money and blah, 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 blah. I don't think anybody, or I think very few people have an idea that there was this struggle involved during the recession, and these numbers are pretty overwhelming. Mm-hmm. The 200,000 to 20,000 is pretty wild. And I feel like the community would be more apt to rally around if they knew this stuff. Do you do a lot of interviews with Marianne and that sort of thing? And
we do. We've had some articles in the paper. We've tried to make pitches, but we can't control what gets published and how. We've tried to take advantage of the town newsletter. Mm-hmm. We'd be happy to hear of other opportunities to make that case to the public. We're good at running airports. We're not, airports our size usually hire marketing firms or rely on our partners to do that, because it's not our expertise.
Was Cape Air going to get new planes for this spring?
Yes, I don't want to speak too much for Cape Air, but they did sign an order with Tecnem, an Italian manufacturer. Peter might be able to say more on that. They are incoming. They still have to receive their FAA certification. All I can say is that the 3 or 4 week shutdown, the ripple effect of that is going to be more like 6 or 9 months for people who relied on those services. So the FAA was shut down. They weren't able to task people to investigate and certify new aircraft coming on the market. Gotcha. The shutdown was a catastrophe for a lot of things.
The word on the street prior to hearing this last statement was you were going to begin to see that plane sometime this year, maybe one of them, but you'd actually see it. So my guess is it's probably going to cycle off until the next year. Yes, with those kind of delays.
And we heard coming back from the Speed Dating with Airlines conference that Cape Air is considering putting them on their essential air service markets to begin with, to bring some value to those routes as they try to market to keep them. So I'm a little less bullish. I think we might be more in the 18 months to 2 years to see them on our routes. There's a lot for an airline that goes into how they allocate their resources.
Let me precede what I have to say by just saying I'm really fascinated by the story, and you're only one step away from a terrific short book. Having put all the statistics together, I think it's a classic example of how a market, transitions and basically have a process of creative destruction. The thing that's always stood out to me as a sore thumb that we could do something about is addressing the unique problem that our market has imposed by weather crises. Mm-hmm. And the crisis materializes with, sort of across the board delays, cancellations because of fog, whatever, for people who want to connect. And we know that there's a plan B. And the only thing that stands between transforming a horrible experience for most of the people who undergo it to one where they say, boy, that was really a slick operation. They got me to my connecting flight because they intervened and they did something. And what that amounts to is the effort that we tried to make by having a counter right outside the restaurant that says, here's all the information you need if you need to exercise Plan B, namely get on a ferry, get on a bus, and get to Boston in time for that connecting flight. And there's a very, very steep learning curve that each individual has to go through, and we all at the airport know how it can work, and we can say, if your connecting flight is after this time, there's a way to get there, and if it's before that time, there's a way to change the reservation so when you do get there, you can get on the next flight. And that just needs to be transformed from an individual level, do it on your own, to a massive intervention that, when I say massive, I mean the numbers of people. It doesn't take a lot of effort, it just takes know-how to have a single ambassador there that says, we can do that, and here's how we can do it. And instead of telling you each how to do it, we're gonna collect you all every 10 minutes and put you on a shuttle bus, and we're gonna get you to the ferry so that you'll be there in time to get on, and we've already cleared that there are enough seats. I don't know how you exercise that, but that's the way of changing the perception from the last experience I had at Nantucket after a great vacation was a horrible time getting off, to maintaining that last thing. I had a great time and we had a close call, but things worked out okay. I want to go back next year. That would be my objective.
So from a community input, there are a couple, this is something we would welcome community and business. There are a couple ways we can skin that. The airport has a Cat 1 instrument landing system now. The FAA isn't inclined to upgrade these. Massport, Worcester, played a political card, got a Cat 3 system for Worcester Airport. If we have more traffic than Worcester, we would have deserved it a lot better. This basically can get aircraft to the ground in 0-0 visibility.
Is that including Cape Air type planes?
The Tecnam, yes, the 402, no.
Okay.
But all other major air carriers. There's always a political route. Like JetBlue told me at this conference, they won't come in the winter to Nantucket because of the weather. It's that much worse than Hyannis. But at the same time, there's an opportunity. We do work very closely with Katie and Matt at Barnstable Memorial Airport, Municipal Airport. They're also making a pitch with JetBlue for year-round service. We are happy to put our power behind their pitch to have daily JFK service out of JetBlue and working with the ferries and our airlines to get people to and from that way. We're certainly looking for some feedback on how to do that. That's one way to cut Boston out of the equation. To utilize, obviously everyone here has a cultural connection to Hyannis. They're comfortable with the modes of transportation. That's something we can pursue. The third is, I mentioned the ILS, I mentioned air service and Hyannis. Shoot, sorry Peter, my third
Well, the thing
here.
that stands out to me, having seen it happen, firsthand, is each airline is a stakeholder, but no airline wants to execute. No airline has the capacity to execute. It calls for an intervention from the outside, and we at Visitor Services are the natural instigator of that, if not staffing it. But it's always struck me as a problem in this arena. It's one of the problems that has a solution.
We have a great ambassador program now that Visitor Services has helped us out with.
But it needs to be a soup to nuts thing. It needs to be executed the way it would be executed I hate to say it, in a Reykjavik, Iceland environment, where I've seen something like that happen. Maybe here's a problem, somebody jumps in, it's already pre-programmed, and they say, just line up here, we're gonna get you from here to there, and then from there to there. And it's gonna be everybody who's got the problem, and we don't need to explain the details, just tell us what the facts are, and you get into group A, B, C, and they get it done. And it's something that can be done, and I don't think it's I don't think it calls for a lot of resources. It calls mainly for know-how. And I think it could be done if we had a focused group of maybe 2 ambassadors on site with the capacity to adjust things on those rare occasions when it happens. And it's probably going to be, you know, you could think of it as, we need to do this on a Sunday when the weather's bad. That's when probably a third of the problem is going to arise. And the other third's going to be some other focused time. And I don't know how to implement it, but it is something that I would say is worth discussing.
Are you referring to, or do you feel like these types of weather emergencies happen a lot during the summer with the $1,100 a day crowd, or is this more a local?
It's
a little bit more of a local.
It's a population-weighted problem. It occurs, as we all know, and we experience it as individuals.
Right.
When you have a very large number of people who've come here for a very big weekend,
right,
and it happens on a Sunday, there's a massive loss of quality of experience. And you can take whatever part of the problem you want to pick off and say, we can solve a third of it with 2 people, we could solve half of it with 3 people, and 2/3 of it with 5 people.
Right, but I'm just saying, just meaning it usually is something like stroll weekend or Daffy.
It's
or,
almost
you know,
any summer weekend when there's lots of people, and and it's confined to people who are here, who haven't been here before or are not experienced with what we all know. It's the newbies and the semi-newbies, and that's most of the people.
And is it usually our weather that's messing them up?
Yeah.
Or is it?
It's our weather. It's a thing that's rare in most airports, but at our airport, it's not so rare.
Plus it's.
I don't want to disagree, but I think, again, there's a perception issue. I think we can go back and see when it happens, who's operating, and if it's been precipitated by a ground delay in JFK, just or in the broader sort of, they call it the East Coast mega region.
Yeah, it could, whatever the cause is, it doesn't matter. The fact is that most people are accustomed to saying, all I need is a 60 to 75 minute time gap between my connecting flights. And that works 90% of the time on Nantucket, 99% of the time everywhere else maybe. But it's that 10% that we need to focus on. It's a very well-defined problem. And I'm sure there's statistics on it.
My bigger concern is what happens if we can't move those people to an alternative carrier. Maybe there are no boats. Maybe it's too late in the evening. As these schedules expand and JetBlue gets, 30 more people in the seats and gets bigger planes, then we're just going to have to deal with what do we do at that end. So I think there needs to be some contingency, ambassador stuff, whatever, so that we're not calling the school and saying, how many cops do you have?
So there are lines where, and sorry for my terminology, there are times where it's the airline problem, which is most of the time. There's time.
Sorry, Noah, can you talk into that mic in case they?
There are times when it's the airline problem, which ends up being most of the time. There are times when it's the airport problem, which is most of the remainder of time. And then there are times where it's the community problem, where it's where is the ambassador, how can the ambassador help shuttle people to the boat to the mainland or to the available lodging list. What we call the meltdown actually rarely occurs, and that tends to be more of a delay where people end up being stranded, is back in a hub, back at Boston or JFK. The airlines tend to do a better job of getting people off of Nantucket because they tend to bear the cost of the overnights on Nantucket, which are prohibitive.
And I think that Mary was wondering too, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you obviously must have an emergency contingency plan if people can't leave the island.
We call in Larry and we bring up cots from the basement.
Yeah.
We haven't had to execute that. But. That isn't our contingency plan.
Yeah.
I just want to be clear on one thing, that it's very easy to define it logically as an airline problem, or, you know, who's really responsible for it. But I'm talking about the effect from a perception problem. Our problem is that people go away and the last impression they had is a bad one. And we're the stakeholder in that, regardless of what the cause is. And normally I'd say, well, that's life, you know, there's nothing you can do about it. But the unique thing about this airport is there's a lot we could do to solve it half the time. It's not a solution that always has, it's not a problem that always has a solution, but it's a problem that we're almost there. We got all the brochures. It's like we're saying, well, look up the schedule, check out, you know, what ferry could you make? And then people say, well, do you think I could make it? And the people at the counter at Cape Air would say, you have to wait in line to ask that question. And, you know, it's so easy. All we need is hands on board to execute it. And I've always been an advocate of saying, just take a bite out of the problem and see if you can solve a third of it. And if it works, then go for half of it. And that's what I see as visitor services opportunity, not necessarily responsibility, but opportunity. And I would advocate for thinking about that while we've got you here to say, you know, what part of that apple could we take a big bite out of, with maybe one or two people who were there when we saw a weather forecast on a weekend during the summer that said, this could happen.
So Peter, specifically, are you asking the airport to do that, or for us to do that?
I'm asking for us to do it.
Okay. So who
This is
would
not
need to-
you can give us guidance on it, you can give us data on it, and you can tell us what the frequency of the incidents is and what causes it. I forgot, this is not just a Nantucket weather problem, this is a metering problem. When planes are here and they say, well, we can't go to Boston because they've got 20 planes coming in from Europe they have to land, and they're gonna be tied up for an hour, please don't send us any, you know, flights from Nantucket because we don't have the capacity to land them.
If I may, I think the solution is a very easy one. If we're talking about a weather event, the other thing that happens in weather events is airline staff, locals, everyone is delayed at their point of origin. One investment we have made at the airport is an automatic FID system. So digital messaging would be something that could be executed immediately. It could be viewable at a number of places. It could repeat, and it's really just a couple keystrokes from someone to do either in their office or remotely from their phone. So
meaning you get a text saying your flight's been delayed.
you get the airline display boards that are in different places at the airport.
So that's working now? For a while it wasn't, in terms of updating flights, but that's all. Sorry.
Yeah, no, so there are two components to that. There's a flight information system database that relies on an FAA data feed, and then there's our internal one where you'll see scrolling advertisements. The advertisements are internally, not to be gauche, but we make money off of that, so we make sure that it's displaying properly. That would be the one that would switch over to an emergency display.
Well, that's a
I say
starting point.
emergency, but it's a quick and easy way to get the information out.
Well, that's a starting point. I didn't know that information was out there, and if that information were accessible, let's say, to an ambassador behind the desk, outside the restaurant, that's a starting point. And I would say, you know, let's maybe follow up by saying, what could that do for a person positioned behind the desk, confronting a line of people that wanted to know, should I try for the ferry, or will that prove to be a failure because the last flight will have left by the time I get there?
I'm looking at David, I'm thinking Susan is good, but I wouldn't want to put her in front of 500 frantic, hectic, canceled passengers.
We can only do so much there for what we're tasked.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that we should be staffing it, I'm just saying it's something that we should recognize as an opportunity that we should maybe try to talk about, refine, and think through about how we could execute it with whatever resources we can get our hands on, let's say, over the next 12 months. Not necessarily for this summer, but at least to try it out this summer on a small scale, and then maybe refine it for the next year if there's some way we can do it. We've already tried out something by having the information desk with an ambassador there, sort of staffed for weekends. I think that's what we did last year, didn't we?
Yes, yes, right?
I'm sorry?
A staff member at the desk?
Okay, I have plans for, people being there Thursday through Sunday. And the thing is that I only have a limited staff, and as Noah knows, we can do, you know, Susan Tate has been been there for 2 or 3 years, so she's very well versed. And, you know, she and Noah have communicated, and also I've communicated with Noah, that, you know, there are a lot of things that we can try to do, but it's just that our position is not, like, we're not like an airport employee. We're here to help the, you know, the visitors coming in, but unless they're fully employed by the airport and trained in such a manner, I find it kind of difficult to see if we can get that going this year.
I would almost think that instead of trying to, or maybe in addition to trying to solve their travel problems, our position would more be if they're stuck here, what can we help them to find to do? Or, you know what I mean? Like, grab your slicker,
you know,
get a
that's
cup of
basically
chowder, like it used to be almost a little bit, you know, like we can't solve everything. It is an island. You know, and
Yeah.
you know, try to encourage them to enjoy the island while they can. Maybe, you know, I know there's angry, you know, these are angry.
You know, we get a
people,
lot
but-
of we get a lot of concerns like where's the gate that I'm supposed to go to, where's my baggage coming from,
Lost and found issues.
you
too,
know,
right?
lost and found. I mean, or, you know, in some cases you get people flying into Nantucket and then having to travel by boat to Hyannis because that's the only way they can get to Hyannis. And so we're, you know, and also where are the buses and where are the taxis and where are the ride shares, and the lost and found. I mean, it's not fair to my staff to, you know, go, I don't mean to sound callous, but, you know, we're not trained for contingencies like that.
No, let me be clear. I'm not advocating for any of that. I want to go back to something.
Sounds like you are.
I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to come across that way. What I'm saying is there was an idea that we had about a year or two ago, which was simply on one of these bad days when you have an ambassador there, what they have at their disposal is something to hand to somebody and
We
say,
do have that.
and that thing says, if you, here is a schedule of what you can do with your problem. If the time is X time, you can make this ferry,
But
it's on a piece of
Right.
paper, you hand it to them.
right.
Make this ferry, and then you can get to Boston on this bus. You hand it to them and say, go away and do that.
And it's there at the desk, and also the thing is that, you know, our staff goes home at 5 o'clock, and a lot of this could be happening after 5 o'clock. And, you know,
Well, then
it's
how-
just, we don't have that in the schedule.
Okay, then we could, if we simply had it as a well-identified handout that says, this is what to do if you have a delay and you want to get to Boston for a connecting flight, here's the schedule. And that piece of paper
And we've
was
been,
all,
we've been
and if
doing
we
that
have
for,
that's,
for several years.
we have, okay, well, if that's working, I wasn't clear that was, at least it wasn't immediately visible when I looked at it the last time, but that's the solution to the problem.
And, yeah,
That's
and
all
that's
I'm-
been,
that's
that's
all I'm
been in
advocating.
place, and we also
Okay.
have it available on our website as well. Not that, you know, trying to promote the website, but it's there, and we update it seasonally because, you know, the buses'
Right.
schedules change and the ferry schedule changes.
Yeah, That's all I'm talking about for a starting point. It's not a staffing issue, it's just a well-identified thing when people come up. If you can get Cape Air to send people to that counter and say, get the thing that's titled so-and-so and use it.
And
That's all I'm talking about.
Susan and the other staff go and they meet with the counter staff to let them know where they are and what is there.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I'm a newer local, and
Oh, no, she's been here forever.
I've been a tourist forever, but I'm a professional tourist and an amateur local. As an amateur local, I would love to be able to fly off this island. I just have never been able to figure out how to afford to do it because the pricing, you know, I can search around on the different flights on different days, on different weeks, and it's a lot of work to figure out how to utilize the airport as a local in an economical way. So for the summer people, it's pretty easy, they're coming once, but is there any effort that any of the airlines make to market directly to the local community with sort of package buying, where you buy 4 flights a year and it's at a discount, and is there anything like that that exists that may help the locals utilize the airport more and help the airlines have a more faith that we're going to be supporting their operations?
For the 4 major carriers, the answer is no, and it would be unlikely that they would ever entertain something like that. The value proposition to them for a local Nantucket market, it doesn't work out on the scale of their operations. We have been talking to Southern Airlines, and they are working on a local package. They understand intrinsically the value of that, and they're looking to roll something out. I don't have the details.
What is Southern like a puddle jumper, or is it a larger?
Southern, if you remember the Islander Caravan,
Yeah.
Southern will be operating the Cessna Caravan, Norwood, Haven, and Providence.
Is that 9 passenger, 10 passenger?
So it's a 9-passenger aircraft, but I believe they're only marketing for 8 seats on a flight. I believe it's going to be a 2-pilot operation.
So for now, for the little guys going from Hyannis to here, it will be Southern, Retrix.
Southern will not be going to Hyannis.
Oh.
They'll be going to Norwood, Haven, and Providence.
Oh, okay. But from Hyannis to Nantucket, which is really all we do.
I would do Norwood.
You would do
I would
Norwood?
do
Okay.
I would do Hanscom.
Okay.
Isn't Louis going into Hanscom? Why Louis? No? Someone's going into Hanscom.
I talk with these carriers, and at this point I'm not sure what I've heard that's privileged versus non-privileged information.
Okay.
But year round,
Somebody's promoted Hanscom somewhere.
will these to Norwood, etc., be year round?
Southern is on through October 14th with the goal of being year-round, but that market, that locally originating market, has to prove itself for them to stay year-round.
Well, we would probably, I would have to say and agree that we would probably need that to be a 2 to tango situation, because unfortunately we can't afford it.
We need to know about it.
We need to know
about it.
If we really want this for our community, we all need to kind of maybe bite the bullet a little bit and take on one of these 4 tickets a year, just to say, look, we're really interested in working with you.
Yeah. And people need to know these stats, so they don't just think it's a greedy thing. So they know that it's like you're trying,
We're all trying together.
Right. I want to straddle a line between being a airport representative and someone who lives in the community year-round with a family who likes to travel. The air service situation nationally isn't that airlines are looking to take aircraft from losing routes and putting them on winning routes. All the routes that they're interested in are winning routes right now. They're just looking for the greatest return on investment over the long run. If an airline, and I'm going to use American, because this was the example that I came back with from Jumpstart. When I pitched them Philadelphia, the answer was, well, this is great. This might be a 20% return on investment for us, but we're going to go with 25% before we ever get to this argument. The argument for an airline like Southern, a small airline who makes its business on being nimble, that's a very hard argument for them when they're looking at a $3 million asset versus something that might break even versus taking it to an existing route in Florida for the winter that will make the money. So it's a very, what communities have typically done to bridge the gap, and this is more of a Chamber of Commerce idea, is the Chamber of Commerce gets involved and they will write checks for revenue guarantees, or they will purchase a certain number of seats. It's not an airport role. The airport takes a hands-off approach, but that's the bridge that happens to make that year-round service work.
And are the Hyannis to Nantucket or anything that's gonna be year-round, I just threw away an Island Air schedule that was in my wallet forever. Like, are they gonna be, is there some consistency, or do they change all the time and you have to look them up online? And like, is there some consistency with these schedules where if you can't make a ferry, you can hop on you know what I mean? Or you can hop on a plane and have it be like kind of not like it used to be, but you know,
A little predictability.
a little predictability, exactly. Or is that an airline?
Yeah, I'm not trying to be glib. That's an airline issue. You know, an airline is going to look at bringing the most value back to their shareholders and reducing the number of their empty legs. And
Well, if you could put it out there, that would be something that would probably be helpful to them as well. You know what I mean? Like, it'd be great maybe to be with airlines, with airline representatives.
I think part of the problem was a lot of us remember the days of going to the airport. Planes left every hour on the hour, every hour and 15 minutes after. We walked up, we got a ticket, and we went. There was one flat fare. It wasn't a load factor thing, and you just went. So that whole scenario was changed, and I think we've got to get with the program to tell people the only way they're dealing with fares is commuter books. In my opinion, you buy a commuter book the same as you can on the boat. That's an
Can you
airline.
buy commuter books with these airlines?
Yes. Cape Air has commuter books. They always have.
But they now expire.
They expire.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, but it's better than not having one. If I could just amplify on one thing that Noah said, it's really, you made a very important point, which is that there's a big nostalgia factor, and we've gone from a demand-oriented regime to a supply-oriented regime. And the only reason that, as I understand it, from my experience, that Cape Air flies the Hyannis route is because that's where they keep their planes at night. So they have a need to get planes to Nantucket to take people to Boston. So you've got planes coming back and forth to Nantucket dictated to some extent by where they need planes to go within the system. And oh, by the way, if you want to fly on one, at this time, we've got 9 empty seats. And I think it's fair to say that the Hyannis-Nantucket route as an alternative for where you'd want to book a plane for tomorrow is far from being the more profitable alternative for Cape Air, given the fact that there's a pilot shortage and there's an airplane shortage. What happens with Cape Air is if they get a mechanical, they don't have a spare plane sitting anywhere like Nantucket saying, well, the plane broke, where's another one? Every plane is booked with with some number of passengers making revenue. And when people say, well, they don't have a backup plane, the answer is they're all flying people right at this moment. That's unfortunately the way the airline industry works today. And so our picture of, well, you're not providing what we want is, that's not the regime anymore.
With a lot of these things we're talking about with pre-fast boats.
Right.
Well,
and that's what totally changed these numbers, and I think,
Yeah.
But, I started working at the airport in 1968, and we had Cape and Islands that was year-round, all winter. We had executive that went to Boston. We had a flight in, I want to think it's Holiday or something, that went to New York. And how many people lived here? 4,200 people. We had two very successful charter business. I know because I worked for one of them. And that was,
PBA was a
then
great
PBA came in. I mean, we have had and we had the slow boat to Woods Hole.
When did
And in the
fa-
summer, you would have.
When did the fast fair start?
Oh, it's 22 years, I think. I think it was 20 years, so I think it's either 22 or 22
96.
years, maybe. One quick question, the seaplane that's coming in from New York, that's been pretty, has that been the one that's been sitting over at PA, at Private Aviation? Is that
We've had that seaplane service on the general aviation side for some time. Shoreline's been an operator for a while. It's, I assume you're referencing the Cape Air purchase of Shoreline Aviation.
Well,
flying to New
I
York.
read about it, but then I've been watching it, flying in and out. So is that active right now? I wasn't,
Yes, and it's actually been active for a few years. They'll leave Manhattan at the 50th
okay.
Street Seaport on the Hudson and
Right.
land on the runway. It's a dual float wheel.
okay, it's just that I've seen it more in the past few weeks than I did before, so.
I think there's renewed interest with the Boston Seaport getting online of expanding that particular model of connecting the business districts of Boston and New York by plane. It really is the most time efficient, even though it's not a luxury level of travel. And then flying those off legs from either city to Nantucket or the Vineyard or Block Island.
Just wanted to throw that out there in case people, and what are they, a 6-passenger?
I believe their aircraft is an 8 or 9, that it's an
it's an-
amphibious caravan.
And the runway, where is the runway? The seaway.
Well,
whatever you call
that
it.
lands at the airport, but it takes off from Manhattan, like the 50th.
Okay.
Yeah, it can land.
Takes off in the water, but it doesn't land in the water?
Correct.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. It's a
Yeah.
dual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is Blade running?
Yes, they are
Out of
operating.
Manhattan.
They run directly out of Manhattan and they transfer in White Plains. The perception is that they're flying helicopters in here. They're not. They're flying fixed wing aircraft.
But it's expensive, it's $1,100 a seat out of Manhattan.
Wow.
But it's in style.
Are there any other questions for
That's somebody's
Noah
whole day.
or comments? Do you have any questions for us, Noah, or comments?
No, we see a lot of you all of the time. We're happy to receive feedback. Again, there are many things we do well: marketing, public communications. While we give it our best shot, we're not. That's not our training. So we're happy to hear from you.
Well, thank you.
I
This
guess
was,
I just have one question. Do you have any, sort of informally speaking, leverage over the airlines collectively to say, you need to get with this program so that this airport works better, or are you completely, are you totally unable to do that? What I'm thinking of is, you know, what I talked about and what David said, you know, we have the staff for, this really belongs with the airlines themselves, and where that document that I mentioned, David, belongs is on the counter at Cape Air. And what should happen is the people at each of the airlines that have this problem should say, here's today's thing to deal with today's problem. Take a copy and do it, and then go away, so that the next person in line can be dealt with. That's an airline problem, but I don't know if there's any way for the airport to make that happen.
The case law for airline operating and lease agreements is constantly evolving. I haven't heard of something requiring the situation that you described. That doesn't mean it couldn't happen. Traditionally, where airports have the leverage over airlines is in their rates and charges. But even then, the power of the airport to raise or lower a rate is minimal compared to the fair yield that an airline can charge. So generally, not as much as you might think.
Okay.
Thank you, Noah.
yeah, that was
Appreciate
very
your time.
informative.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Glad to come back.
All right, thank you. Okay, thank you.
I just saw what you're talking about, David, on the website that Peter was referring to, the flights canceled section.
Yeah.
So I think it, I think it does a nice job of
Thank you.
explaining
And it,
what to do.
you know, it's probably with the boats changing their
Tells you the
schedules
boats
shortly
and it
and the
tells you the
buses adding their
buses.
summer schedule, I have to go back into it this week and confirm what's there.
Yes.
Okay.
No, it's a link on the visitor services site that says flights canceled, what to do, and it has
Yeah.
a little
And,
explanation.
you know,
and it has the schedules.
I'm sorry, I just realized this after Noah's left, but there is signage behind our desk that says flight canceled, you know, go to this.
Oh, there is, okay.
Yeah.
Let me make one suggestion. I'm just trying to figure out how to execute this. I assume you're gonna prepare some kind of a brochure like we've had in the
Yeah,
past.
it's a,
Okay,
it's a
all right,
three-way fold brochure
Okay.
that we've had, you know,
all right. I'll tell you
at
what,
least 2 or 3
you
years.
get one or, get me a handful of those,
Sure.
and I will go shop that
Okay.
with the Cape Air manager and say, this can solve your problem at the counter if you just have a stock of these. You can pick them up over there by the restaurant, have them, and give your people at the counter these things so that when the person comes up, you hand them that and say, do this, and then you can get to the next person on. I think there's an incentive there for Cape Air to execute it.
Mhm.
I don't know about the other airlines, and they don't really have the problem because they don't fly to Hyannis.
Right.
All right.
So let's try that out.
Okay. Any other comments about this? We haven't had a foggy, they don't know, we haven't had a foggy summer yet.
Not yet.
Not in a while, not like, directors, no, sorry, Tour of Lights, December 2019. I'm sorry, was the other conversation over?
Yep.
Okay. Tour of Lights, December 2019. This is something I'd asked Janet to, if we were gonna continue or not.
David and I have had a conversation about coming up with a map for next year, but avoiding the contest, because what we're planning to do is to get in one of our automobiles in early December and drive around and see who has lights on their house. Make a map that says, here's a house with lights, here's a house with lights, here's a house with lights, and have that available for the public. But not to have the contest because, or to recruit houses, because it takes an enormous amount of staff time to get that activity going. And if the goal is to see houses with lights, then we can make a map of houses with lights.
So people could call in and say they want to be on the map.
If they want to call in, we'd be happy to put them on.
Yeah.
But I think the more efficient way is to go around and, with a map and make X's and make that available for people. So that's our plan.
To make a plan and, make a map and have it available after school. That sounds good to me, it answers all the questions that I
Although on an
got.
island, I will continue to say, I find it remarkable that people can't drive around and see the houses with lights, that they need a map to do that, but.
But I will say, if I didn't live here
I'm not so much.
or was
yeah,
visiting, I wouldn't know that, some random house on Daffodil Lane,
Yeah.
that beautiful.
I mean, is
It's
the business, is it something you want to do in the office, or do you not want to do it?
We,
Because if you don't, then,
we can do,
if it
obviously
seems
the
like a
demand
silly
is there.
thing,
The
then
demand for
I
maps
think the
are there.
demand is there.
And it's just that we're trying to kind of economize and be more efficient, but the map is the way to go, and we'll just figure out the best, houses that are on the map.
Well, do a map, put it on the website, and you can tell how many people download it.
Right,
Yeah.
and if they don't,
And
then.
we did
then
that
don't.
before. It's just
Yeah, exactly.
I needed to reevaluate and determine what the best course of action was.
And the most demand we got for it was between the 23rd of December and the
Yeah.
26th of December.
Yeah,
So if we wait till middle of December to do this, we've still got plenty of time.
Get the word out ahead of time and let people know.
okay. Any other questions or comments on that? All right, director's update?
Yeah, a lot's going on. We're seeing an increase in visitors. David will talk about that stuff. But 4th of July, we're giving away 750 of these water bottles. That say, we did it with Remain Nantucket. They've got 500, we've got 750. It says reduce, reuse, recycle, and it has a URL on it for where the water filling stations are downtown.
Awesome.
So we'll be handing those out. This is a sample. The I'm working with Mark Willett and Rob McNeil to identify potential locations for outdoor water filling stations, which will require some approval by the HDC because the official water filling stations are kind of ugly, so we might have to shingle it, but it's going to take a while to figure that out. We've got the art installation done at Sparks Avenue. We rolled out the Blue Man and put in the Hofstetler piece on May 23rd. Yesterday, we collaborated with the Chamber on their Experience Nantucket, their hospitality and customer service program. I did an introduction and David did an overview of what we do at Visitor Services, and they also had speakers on history and culture and variety of.
Was it well attended?
How many were there in the first session?
35, I think. Yeah, it was in the Harbor View room.
The program that we're doing this summer is this Melville 200. It's a calendar of events in here for all the programs that I collaborated with these organizations that are on the back of this to do different kinds of programming. One of the fun things that we're doing are these pop-up Moby Dick read aloud contests. So we've got these podiums, we're gonna put them at these locations on the middle page here around town. We have people take a selfie, send it to that hashtag, and Queequegs and Or the Whale have given me gift certificates to give away to people. We'll pick a winner once a week and give those away. So it's a fun collaboration between culture and commerce. Part of that is also yet another walking tour for visitors, for another way to experience Nantucket. It's a Melville walking tour, and these are hot off the press. The NHA put this together with some help from us because they didn't know about Thomas Nicholson's house, and we'll start distributing those this week.
Can I ask you just a question? When are people doing the read-aloud?
July and August. We'll be putting those out in July and August. It's halfway down. You can just walk up to one of these podiums that will have a selection from Moby Dick on it.
And these are the locations.
Got it. It's not a scheduled
No,
thing, like there's not an actor doing it.
there's a marathon reading going to happen in November of the entire Moby Dick. This is a way just to
Yeah, I love it. History.
engage folks.
Love it.
Spring Art Week had about 35 businesses involved in the programming. So there was art in facilities, and then a lot of the nonprofits were involved with that as well. We had 3 events listed in the statewide publication of Spring Art Week. I just came back on Sunday from the Creative Communities Exchange, CCX. It's sponsored by the New England Foundation for the Arts. And my goal there was to look at ideas for shoulder season programming and cultural planning ideas. Do we need a cultural plan? That kind of conversation. And I probably went to 3-4 workshops on that and came away with the notion that if each cultural organization already has a strategic plan, I think the best service I can provide is to see where they overlap or could connect, rather than to come up with a new one, or to engage people in a cultural planning process if they've already gone through it with their own mission and objectives. So I'm gonna take that on as my task this fall to see if I can collect those strategic plans and start to see how those goals and objectives overlap, and maybe have a conversation that way about that. The other activity that's coming up shortly is there's this program called Visit Widget, and it's a widget we can put on our website to help people plan their visit to the island. It can also be a kiosk in different locations, and the Chamber has invited me to participate in a phone meeting to find out what we think about it. So it's kind of an electronic information aid. I don't know enough yet about who provides the information to feed the widget, and whether and what the monthly fee is, but some of the numbers that I've seen shows it's north of about $200 a month. Yeah.
Like 200 or 300 or so.
It's not cheap to do it, so we're just gonna take a look at it. And other than that, I wanna thank Diane. This is her last meeting as chair.
Thank you.
And for her service for 9 years on Visitor Services.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Like that.
I think it deserves a round of applause.
Thank you. All right, and director's update, David?
Okay,
Oh, wait, any questions for Janet on everything she was talking about, which was a lot going on?
I actually have a question. Is this the beginning of something with NHA that maybe is gonna result in one or two things like this every couple of years on a new tour? I mean, the format of, you read about it, there's a nice simple map on the other side, and it probably doesn't cost a lot to print.
Well, last year we did the Mariah Mitchell one,
Right.
and then we did the Sconset one. We did one for Frederick Douglass, and this year we're doing Melville. So next year
Okay.
I'll find another theme.
All right,
We might take, the count is getting pretty full of walking tourists right now, so we're gonna have to maybe
all right.
cycle some through.
I just want to say that I really like the format, and I wanted to bring up one point which has to do with the water bottle thing. Everybody who gets one of those free things is going to have a URL on it, and everybody else, some of whom I've heard from, one or two, said, I've already got a fancy water bottle, but I don't know where to fill it, and it doesn't have a URL. So what I'm wondering is it possible when we conceive of these kinds of maps to have, in addition, a very standard kind of muted format that says, by the way, there are two things you really want to know when you stuff this in your pocket. Where's the bathroom and where's the water bottle filling station? Because that is going to really help execute this. And I also know that if something like this comes out and there is a map that says, here's a nice tour, and by the way, here's where you fill your water bottle, the Civic League can distribute this to our 2,000 plus families and say, those of you who want to fill your water bottles, there's a new map for that, and that will supplement the supply of things that are going to be handed out and get a much larger audience of people who will say, now I know where to use this thing, I'm going to stop using plastic, I'm going to use my bottle because I can take it with me in town.
I've met with 2 members of the Civic League in the last week, and I was only here for 3 days, so, to talk about distributing information about water filling stations. And I will just comment that the list of water filling stations is on our website. We've put it on our Facebook page periodically, and as is the new map of public restrooms, are both on there. So, you know, we do as much as we can with social media to get that out there. Space is limited on these things, so we can try to do that, but at this point, this one's gone to press. And
No, I don't mean on this one in particular. I'm just saying going forward, if we just think about a map that's as readable as this, that could possibly have a very muted overlay of tiny dots that say, by the way, water bottle filling station.
Pocket
Is it-
map maybe? and,
yeah,
you know,
Well,
we
it
are
could-
doing, we're doing with the public information officer a major campaign to let people know about the plastic ban, and that will
Yeah.
include a list of water filling stations, and so it's going on a lot of different fronts.
Okay, so it's heading in that
Communicate.
direction, okay.
Right. But I would shy away from putting too much information on some of these maps. They get too
Okay,
crowded.
okay.
But the pocket map, when we do it, might be a good spot to do that. The advantage to having it, the URL, is that when we add more filling stations, we can change the
We can
website.
change it, yeah.
Okay, David?
Okay, I included the May statistics for the office and the other outlying locations that were open. We were pretty steady compared to last year, with 2,170 people coming through the office, and also had Straight Wharf open for the Memorial Day weekend, and Greenhound was open from May 21st to 31st, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and also again Saturday and Sunday of Memorial Weekend. The weekly restaurant list obviously is not as popular as it was in April when not as much was open, but it is still being downloaded the most. And the other information here is what was downloaded. Other stuff has not been discovered or has been will be discovered. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is that as you see, we have the 4th of July poster for our events on Thursday and Friday of the 4th and 5th. So that's the tentative schedule for now. It's pretty self-explanatory. The other thing I wanted to point out is that we won for the third year in a row, Best of Nantucket, Best Summer Event for the INM's Best of Nantucket contest. And so that beat out the Boston Pops again. So 3 years in a row must be telling you something that we're doing pretty well.
Did you just leak a top secret?
What's
Did
that?
you just leak a secret?
No, it's now. Oh yeah, well, it's Thursday. Thursday's the official kickoff. So, but I guess, you know, you guys are in the know now. So, the other thing is I am now doing radio ads on WACK every that run each week that update the island as to what's going on, and we're going to start kicking off our children's beach events next week. So I have also included this poster. So starting on the 17th, we'll have the staff down there helping out with activities. We'll have a great movie lineup as well as concerts on Sunday night. And the other activities we'll be adding as we go into the season in July and August. And also the staff has toured a couple of the inns, the Graydon House and the Carlisle House, and a few more will be added as we get into the season so that they can see what's going on. And the being inside the Graydon House is very interesting. So, you know, each place is different from the next, but that's all I have. So anybody have any questions?
I have one question. Last year, did we stop August around that same date in August?
We tried to go into September,
Right, and it
and we
wasn't
didn't have the
numbers.
successes we expected. So we're just going back to our normal, you know, 2-month schedule.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you. There weren't, yeah, I don't remember, but the numbers weren't that.
I also had a personnel issue that
Right.
was somebody that was unable to come to, you know, scheduled a couple things, so it just didn't work out.
Okay. Nice group up. I like the music, the movies.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, these
Yeah,
are really great.
great job.
These are, this is a tactile presence that gets you beyond, you can find it on the website, crowd.
Make sure I have these in the cabinets. It's really nice.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
I don't have anything.
I will miss everyone. This has been a great group. This has been amazing. I feel like we've done a lot. So I thank each and every one of you. And if I don't wave when I'm in the taxi, it's because I never see anyone.
So
People will go
what
by.
was your phone number if we have any questions?
You won't.
Classic.
Your great leadership.
Yeah, what happened
And
to
you,
Sam? Who told
do we
Sam?
have new members coming on?
Josh Gray is gonna be joining us from the Nantucket Dreamland.
Well, that's gone from, okay. All right.
Libby is working on the appointments now. They're doing the select board ones first before she does the town, the ones that she appoints.
Oh, he'll be great. Okay. Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
Second? All in favor?